Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. I want to first and foremost wish everyone a fantastic, healthy, happy, warm holiday season, whatever holiday you celebrate, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. I want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday. You know, this Ruby Franke case, we made some predictions on this early. And one of the predictions that we made is that Ruby Franke was going to look to cop a plea. Was going to look, and we always say when there's co-defendants, the first one that volunteers to cut a deal gets the best deal and testifies against the other one. However, it seems in this case that the conduct of both of them, Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, was horrific. However, it really seems to me, if I had to pick one over the other, that Ruby Franke was not as bad as Jodi Hildebrandt. I think they were equally bad. But thus, here we see copping a plea. And in copping this plea, a plea bargain, as we refer to it in the legal business, copping this plea is enabling her to get a better deal. And these charges were no joke. 6 counts of felony child abuse, all potentially having a sentence of 1 to 15 years that can be imposed by the state. So by cutting this deal, it's a little more complicated than they'll have us believe. By cutting this deal, it'll be a hell of a lot less time to have to serve. But it appears that, and as I wrongly predicted last night, I was predicting that Ruby Franke may walk and just have to plead to a felony. However, that's not the case. She's going to have to do some, not jail time, prison time. So how long that is, and she had to plead to 4 felonies. So those each carry 1 to 15, but and they run consecutively. So 4 counts she pleads to. So is that a minimum of 4 to 60? So could she potentially do less than 4 years? Sentencing gets a little fugazi, as they say in New York. I want to play the hearing today where Ruby Franke pled, where she walked into court, and to me, she seems extremely cold and almost robotic-like in the way she appears before the court. And we're going to play that. But first, guys, hold on to your seats and get ready for true crime from a police perspective. You're about to answer and enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch. Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Well, we're back, and I'm going to right now go right to the hearing where Ruby Franke enters the court, and to me, she seems a little bit robotic and a little bit almost like mind-controlled, but she's been in prison since the very end of August, so September, October, November. We're in the middle, so 3.5 months she's been in prison, in jail. There's a difference between jail and prison. We spoke about that last night. So she's been in jail for 3 months, 3.5 months. Usually that cools you out a little bit. So let's watch her in this hearing where she is pleading guilty to these charges.
Ms. Franke is now here. Mr. Winward, we are scheduled for a waiver hearing. Is there going to be a waiver today?
There will, plus a plea agreement, Your Honor.
All right.
I'll ask the bailiff to hand you if it's been executed.
All right. Mr. Winward, you have discussed with Ms. Franke a preliminary hearing, what's involved in a preliminary hearing. She understands she has a right to a preliminary hearing on all of the charges in the case. She understands what the charges are, and she's prepared to waive a preliminary hearing in the case on all charges.
She is, and that is contained in this agreement on page 7 as well.
Very good. All right, I've been handed a plea agreement, and it appears to be signed by Ms. Franke. Ms. Franke, did you sign this agreement?
Yes,
And you did that today? When did you sign it?
on the 18th.
Okay. You've read it.
You know, when you're in front of a judge, you are absolutely humbled. And by that, I mean, the judge is high above the courtroom. You're sitting there in a striped zebra suit. Lo and behold, this one is white and gray. You're handcuffed in front of you. And I believe that the arrogance coming out of Ruby Franke's mouth is evident. Someone in the chat says, she's angry. She's an angry woman. She's not coming across very humble to me, you know? And you want to be humble in front of a judge who is making decisions on your fate. Granted, she's about to plead guilty to 4 charges, but I see no humbleness in her. I see no sorrow. I see no regret. And I'm just reading her body language. And I don't know if you guys in the chat agree with me, but it's really a little disconcerting to me. She's been in jail for 3.5 months, and it hasn't chilled her heels out a little bit.
Carefully.
Every word.
Your signature represents to the court that you've read it carefully, that you understand what you've read, and that you agree to all of the terms. Is that all accurate?
Yes,
You've had sufficient time to ask questions of your counsel, to go over any questions you have. You're ready to go forward.
yes,
You don't need any more time.
I'm ready.
Ms. Franke, is anyone pressuring you to enter into this agreement?
No,
Anyone promising you anything I haven't been told about?
no,
Anything that's not in the written plea agreement?
no,
Are you under the influence of alcohol or drugs today?
no,
Is there anything today that could in any way interfere with your ability to understand the agreement, its consequences, anything?
no,
No physical condition, no medication, nothing?
no,
Any further record, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Winward, we ready to proceed?
We are ready to proceed.
All right then. Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
guilty,
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
guilty,
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
guilty,
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
with my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty,
There is a factual basis set forth in the agreement that is a stipulated factual basis, counsel.
That's correct, Your Honor. That is correct, Judge Walton.
The court finds that the factual basis is sufficient. All of the terms of the agreement are stipulated, including that the court obtain a pre-sentence investigation report, correct?
Correct.
There won't be any argument about whether prison is the appropriate sentence, and there's an agreement about the 4 counts running consecutive.
That is correct.
All right, the court finds then that Ms. Franke's pleas are made knowingly and voluntarily. The court therefore accepts and enters those pleas. The court orders the preparation of a pre-sentence investigation report to be prepared by AP&P and the Department of Corrections. Counsel, what about sentencing on February 20th? I think, do you and your client agree to waive time, counsel?
We do agree to waive time, Your Honor.
February 20th, I believe, is a Tuesday. Is that right? Tw 10 a.m.?
That works for us, Your Honor.
All right. Anything else for today?
Or maybe, I've heard the court say this several times in a different fashion. We are not binding the court to any specific sentence, and the court retains its right to sentence as it sees fit. I just mentioned that this is not a Rule 11 plea, but although it's a stipulated statement of defendant.
Counsel approach, please.
Seems like the counsel is throwing a curveball to the judge that the judge didn't necessarily agree with. So they're going to have a little sidebar, as they used to say in the O.J. Simpson case, every 2 minutes. It's quiet now because the attorney is speaking to the judge at a sidebar. They'll be back in a second. This isn't a long sidebar. I watched this previously. They're speaking together of legal matters that they didn't want the entire court.
All right,
to
anything
hear.
else for today?
Here we go.
No, Judge.
Nothing from the state.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. We are in recess.
Thanks, John.
So that's the hearing, and I was not, what I wanted to see, and maybe it'll take place at the sentencing, is something called an allocution. And last night on our show, Mike Geary, who's an attorney, explained. I tried to explain it in my cop lingo, but I think I did a halfway decent job. In an allocution, the defendant must admit to each and every subdivision of the statute, so that later on they can't say, oh, I didn't know, I didn't realize. So the court makes them admit to each and every part of the crime that they've committed. And I thought that perhaps Ruby Franke was going to do that today. However, it seems that perhaps on February 20th, when she's formally sentenced, that's when she will do her allocution. And this way a defendant doesn't get away with not having to admit to all the horrific things they did, and the knowledge of it, that what they did was against the law. They broke the law, and what they did was horribly wrong, because you don't get a deal with the state. And this is a deal. This is a plea bargain. And it comes with addendums. And one of the addendums is, guess what? She testifies against Jodi Hildebrandt. And remember, we said earlier on that whoever agrees to testify against the other first cuts the best deal. So was that what occurred? That Ruby Franke jumped out first and said, oh, yeah, I want to cut a deal, or her law firm? I just want to read what the law firm, and the law firm, it's called the Winward Law Firm, who's representing Ruby Franke. And this law firm made a long statement, and I'm going to put a picture of Ruby Franke on the screen. Winward Law is making a statement on behalf of Ruby Franke regarding the pending charges in the Washington County 5th District Court, along with her thoughts about her current family situation. Our client is working with the prosecutor's office and anticipates resolving this matter quickly by entering a plea agreement with the court on Monday, December 18th, which you just witnessed. She made a plea. Ruby Franke is a devoted mother and is also a woman committed to constant improvement. Initially, Ms. Franke believed that Jodi Hildebrandt had the insight to offer a path to continual improvement. Ms. Hildebrandt took advantage of this quest and twisted it into something heinous. Over an extended period, Ms. Hildebrandt systematically isolated Ruby Franke from her extended family, older children, and her husband, Kevin Franke. This prolonged isolation resulted in Miss Franke being subjected to a distorted sense of morality shaped by Miss Hildebrandt's influence. During Ruby Franke's incarceration in Washington County Jail over the past few months, she has actively engaged in an introspection that has allowed her to reset her moral compass and understand the full weight of her actions. Miss Franke is committed to taking responsibility for the part she played in the events leading up to her incarceration. Demonstrating a sincere dedication to personal growth and rehabilitation, she has actively begun the process by reaching out to members of her family. Through heartfelt apologies, she seeks to mend relationships and contribute positively to the healing journey of her family. Ruby is aware that Kevin Franke has filed for divorce. While she is devastated by this news, she acknowledges and understands his anger and reasoning. Despite the pain, she respects his decisions and remains hopeful that with time, she can contribute to rebuilding trust and fostering understanding within her family. Ruby has offered her full cooperation to help the children reunite with their father. Wynwood Law recognizes the profound love that Miss Franke holds for her children, and we are genuinely saddened that she found herself on this challenging path under the influence of Miss Hildebrandt. It is our firm belief that Miss Franke is a devoted mother who, unfortunately, was led astray. She is sincere in her commitment into securing the best possible future for her family, and we remain hopeful that, with the right support and understanding, she can navigate a path of healing and growth. That is like one of the most brilliant pieces of crap I've ever read. I mean, totally takes no responsibility for her actions, blames it all, which we knew she was going to do, blames it all on Jodi Hildebrandt, right? It was all Jodi. It was mind control. But you know what's she can't defend against, and maybe that's why she pled? How about the 7 years that Ruby Franke had the podcast called 8 Passengers that showed on it a certain level of child abuse during the show? How could she defend against that? Bella Finn, thank you so much for the $7.99 super sticker. You're a very cherished subscriber, fan, and friend. Thank you so much. So how does she defend against her actions prior to going into business with Jodi Hildebrandt? How could she defend those actions? Can anyone tell me that? How does she now blame it all? Was it mind control? And as to her husband that you see in the picture on the screen here, she had nothing to do with him for 14 months. And now she's shocked and saddened that he filed for divorce. And by the way, he's no prize either, you know? For 14 months, he didn't see his children, didn't attempt to see his wife. Is he a wimp? What was that all about? Why didn't he try to go see his family, his friends, his wife? So I have said numerous times in covering this story, I believe that Kevin Franke should be charged also. How is he getting a free pass? I don't understand that. If anyone in the chat can explain that to me, why is Kevin Franke getting a free pass? He was on that Donna Champion. I hope the prosecutor remembers 8 Passengers channel, or is that okay to sweep that abuse under the rug? OMG, oh my God, yes. Donna, I totally agree with you. So for 7 years, well, Ruby just pled guilty. So she's at the mercy of the court, although she's expecting a deal that was hammered out between her attorneys and the state and the prosecution. In exchange, nothing's for free, in exchange for her testimony against Jodi Hildebrandt. So, sometimes they want the bigger fish so bad that they'll let the smaller fish get away and not get away scot-free, but get a deal. And she's getting a deal. Look, you look at her, she looks like a pleasant woman. She's attractive. She's young. She's pretty. And that can be disarming at times. But when you watched her in court, wow, she came across as a cold, as someone else said in the chat, an angry, angry woman. Who is she to be angry? You know who should be angry? Her children and the way they were treated and the people who were counseled by her and Jodi Hildebrandt. She should be lucky that, she cut this deal, because instead of doing 6 counts of 1 to 15 years, she now pled down to 4. They threw out 2 of those 6 charges. And when I hear the sentencing, and there's always a possibility with sentencing, it can be difficult to understand at times that with sentencing, they can play with it a little bit. So she's getting 4 counts she had to plead guilty to, 4 felonies, right? But they each carry a term of 1 to 15. So as decided by, you'll see the language that they use, an attorney from the Winwood firm uses in this little clip I'm going to play next. So if she pleads guilty to 4 counts, could there be and it's consecutive, which means one after another, not concurrent, means that they would run at the same time, which is a joke. Concurrent is an absolute joke. Consecutive means you finish the first year, you start the second year. However, I think there's room in there for the Department of Corrections to play games with this sentence. There's always time off for good behavior, time off for this, time off for that. So in reality, is it going to be based on her performance in her testimony against Jodi Hildebrandt? Will that be a deciding factor? Because everyone that's followed this case and has seen this abuse, really, when I said last night when I did the show with Professor Mike Geary, that is there a possibility that Ruby Franke could walk, that just plead guilty to a felony or felonies and get no prison time? Is that a possibility? I thought it was, because you could, if you plead guilty, in minimum, you would get 5 years probation and maybe serve under the supervision of the state, but not in prison. But it looks like she's going to prison. She's absolutely going to prison. So let me play a little bit of the attorney from the Winwood law firm, who introduces, who is going to introduce what's actually going to happen, and more in legalese more so. And we'll hear what he has to say.
To the ongoing case involving Jodi Hildebrandt, additional statements to the media at this time. For further information, we refer you to the pleading document in support of guilty plea and the factual basis and the plea terms in that.
What are the plea terms? Just basically.
And I can do that also. Like I said, we'll be happy to, if you contact our office, we'll be happy to release this if we get it up before the court gets it up. But the plea terms are relatively simple. She pled guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. The state agreed to dismiss the 2 other counts of child abuse. And she agreed to serve a prison term, and that the term for the 4 different counts will run consecutively and not concurrently. And she agrees, I'll read this one verbatim. She agrees to testify truthfully against Jodi Hildebrandt, and in return, the Washington County Attorney's Office agrees to remain neutral regarding future hearings before the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole.
And how long is the plea? How long is she serving those sentences?
So those sentences, each count is a 1 to 15 year term, but under the Utah sentencing guidelines, that's all flexible and up to the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole.
Will they know that more?
There's the key right there, and I want to play that again. Each part of the sentence is flexible and up to the Utah Board of Pardons. Whoa. So does that mean they could say, oh, she did a year, that's enough, we're going to let her out, and she's going to be on supervised release? Let me play that again. We'll hear what he said.
February during her sentencing?
No. So in February, she'll be sentenced, and then the Board of Pardon and Parole will hold a review hearing, and that typically happens about 6 months after people go to prison. And at that point, they set the date for the next review hearing, but that's all up to them and how they handle that.
Any time served count towards that?
Typically, almost always, time served counts towards stuff.
Can you go into the decision to remove 2 of those counts of child abuse?
I can't get into any more on that until both cases are resolved and appellate times have run.
And you said she'll be testifying against Hildebrandt?
She agrees to testify against Hildebrandt.
Okay.
So,
Thank
you guys.
Okay.
So there it is. So she pled guilty. 2 of the charges were dropped against her, and she pled guilty to 4 of them. And for those for pleading guilty, she agrees to testify against Jodi Hildebrandt and testify truthfully and to remain neutral in front of the Utah Board of Pardons. I'm not exactly sure what that means, to remain neutral in front of the Utah Board of Pardons. Well, that is another thing that she, so, the New York Times says, I think they got it wrong, actually, but they reported that Jeff M., hang on a second, I want to read. Jeff M., 1 to 15 years consecutive, 4 counts. I predicted 2.5 to 5 year sentence. She probably served 4 and get out with good behavior on her minimum release date. Jeff, I think you probably know more than me about this, but I think when they spoke about none of this sort of was concrete that it could be added to or deleted to by the Utah Board of Pardons. As soon as I heard that, I was like, whoa. So is that determinant upon how well she testifies? Is that what that is? Is that going to be a determining factor? So as we said, she got to them first, and whoever turns first gets the best deal. And she turned first, and Jodi Hildebrandt, not that she was a stand-up person, you could see she's not, but now all of a sudden she's going to defend herself not only against these obvious charges, but the fact that her co-defendant, right there up on the screen, her co-defendant is going to testify against her. Never a good thing, never good that your co-defendant, after the fact, when there's trouble, your co-defendant has decided that you are the most despicable, egregious person on this earth, and I'm going to testify against you because my freedom is much more important than yours. And you were the horror. You controlled me. You talked me into this, even though I have 7 years of a podcast that shows that I was an abusive mother. So that's a little bit crazy, when you look at some of these photos here too of Ruby Franke, and the fact that there was more than, before she even joined Connections and Jodi Hildebrandt, there was more than 10 complaints against her podcast in regards to the way she treated her children. So this is not anything that we're shocked at. Oh, she was mind controlled by Jodi Hildebrandt. That's who was the bad. No, but she had some problems. She had some, use the term that we all love these days, she had some issues before this. And as for her husband, Kevin, let's not let him walk free either. I see problems with Kevin here. I really do, and I know there's always going to be some people in the chat that know more than me here in regards to the religious aspect of this. What was the church's role in this? And at the very least, the church was referring clients to Jodi Hildebrandt. And thus, if they were referring them to Jodi, they were also referring them to Ruby, because Ruby was a partner with Jodi. You know, and when we talk about the 8 Passengers podcast that ran for 7 years, they had anywhere from 2 million to 2.5 million subscribers. And in the world of YouTube, I think that conservatively equals about 100,000 or more dollars per month they were making from their podcast. So they were not, doing this out of the goodness of their heart or to teach people. They were doing this for money, obviously for money. And so they sacrificed the well-being of their children. You think their children really wanted to be on this podcast all the time? I think not.
Mental health counselor Jodi Hildebrandt. She and Hildebrandt work together for Connections Classroom, an online counseling business with many videos on parenting advice. 2 of Franke's children were found malnourished with serious wounds in Hildebrandt's Ivan's home on August 30th. Franke and Hildebrandt were arrested and charged with 6 counts each of child abuse. KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas says the plea agreement is surprising.
It appeared from the beginning that the defendants in this case were fighting their charges. They were going as far as they could to fight them.
Franke's legal team says she's a devoted mother who worked with Hildebrandt, believing she could improve herself and her family, but was led astray. The 2 women were featured in several videos together.
Where the state has gone to one party and said, look, if you'll help us and testify against the other party, we'll give you a slightly better plea bargain.
Skorda says the deal might offer reduced charges or a suspended or lesser sentence.
It depends on how anxious, I should say, the state is to get the testimony of the co-defendant and what they're willing to give up in exchange for that.
Franke's team says she has reset her moral compass and will take responsibility for her actions leading up to her arrest.
A plea bargain entails that there is some acceptance of responsibility, some plea to a lesser charge, and we'll just have to see what that is.
And Franke's court appearance is scheduled for 11 tomorrow morning. That's when we'll find out the details on this plea bargain. We'll bring you updates as they come from Washington County. Shelby.
So, that was yesterday when they were predicting what this plea bargain was going to look like. And then we were trying to predict it yesterday. And I was speaking with Professor Mike Geary on our show last night. And we were talking about perhaps she won't do any prison time. And Professor Geary said, no, she's definitely going to do some prison time. But I see there's a lot of room for the state to maneuver here, a lot of room to show leniency. But they also have room to be punitive about it, which it seems most people that have been following this podcast and other podcasts all want to see her punished. Donna Champion. Ruby Franke pleading guilty shouldn't give her a pass to freedom ever. These children are victims and need justice from the judicial system. Donna, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I just know, though, how the criminal justice system thinks, how they work. And, they would almost rather have someone outside the criminal justice system, outside of prison, and living, free and not punish them. I don't know if punishment is a word that the criminal justice system wants to use these days. It's sort of sad because when we watch this case and then when we listen to that, the letter written by the law firm, it's almost like, well, come on, stop. It's like a fairy tale. That you might buy that if she didn't have 7 years of her podcast, which showed on the screen her bad acts, and I meant to say acts, ACTS, not AX. I sound like axe, but yeah, which showed her bad act. And, but when we look at Jodi Hildebrandt, she does come across as this evil thing. And she is. She really destroyed a lot of lives. Let me play a little bit of this in regards to who is Jodi Hildebrandt.
My style is compassionate, yet direct and clear of what is necessary to fully change and champion any addictive or self-destructive behavior, whether it be ravenous addictions, feelings of worthlessness or inadequacy, conflicts in relationships, intimacy problems, communication breakdowns, and frankly, any block that prevents having and creating peace and joy. Here's a clip from Connection's Instagram account from last November. It's Jodi Hildebrandt talking about how parents can help their children when they act out.
So many of us that are parents, it's like, I don't want to have to track them down. I don't want to have to just, like take everything away from them. And it's like, you're not taking things away from them. What you're doing is you've handed them things that they're not managing. And so it's your job to make sure that the first thing they manage is themselves. Like,
manage and children. I think what a parent is supposed to be is a teacher, is teaching. And management, this isn't a job. These aren't employees. These are your kids. And I always felt that as a parent, my main role was to be a teacher, to teach my kids how to do things the right way, to be kind and to be loving and to follow the rules and the laws, not to manage. You sound like a supervisor of a job, That was my job in the police department, to manage. Wasn't at home. At home, you should be a teacher.
they understand how to manage themselves. They know how to be responsible for themselves. They know how to not blame. They know how to get curious, which means humble. They know how to ask questions. They know how to say, that doesn't feel right. Can you help me understand? They know how to do all that. And when you give them activities or you give them opportunities that they engage in where they can't manage themselves, they're only going to become more and more unmanageable.
And BB2, that's great. Well, guess what, Jodi? You're going to be managed now. Absolutely, she is. Her life is going to be managed by the state prison system.
Inside of these activities.
Hildebrandt also talked last year about what sex should be like between two people who are married.
If we're going to be sexual, that we do it inside the institution, the constructs of a marriage. And not just a marriage, I go and I get married, but a marriage between a man and a woman who love God, which means they individually love God. So there's no lust in your marriage.
Oh, ouch, ouch, ouch. There's no lust in your marriage. Where did that come from? If there's no lust in your marriage, you have a bad marriage, She's teaching that. I mean, first of all, what is her qualifications to be teaching sex and marriage? I don't know if she has any, but that's where the religious aspect in her counseling collided head on, and a head-on collision to bad teaching. I don't think she knows what she's talking about.
It's I love me, I love God, and so therefore I truly love you, which means I will never take from you. I will never use you to make me feel better.
Jodi Hildebrandt claims to have counseled thousands of people over the years. She says she's counseled families of all ages with her unique style of educating about the power of choice and the need for impeccable honesty. A 6-week individual leadership training goes for $795 on her website. Company training costs nearly $15,000. Hildebrandt and Franke appeared to be business partners. The Contact Us page on the Connections website lists Ruby Franke as the contact. Photos on the website show the two together. Ruby Franke is listed as a certified mental fitness trainer at Connections. She produces content for social media that focuses on empowering parents and children to live their truth. According to the affidavit filed in support of the child abuse charges, 2 of Franke's children had been at Hildebrandt's home last week. A 12-year-old boy climbed out of the window, asking a neighbor for food and water. Duct tape was on his wrists and ankles, and he had deep lacerations from being restrained.
When you hear about what this whole situation of what actually got them caught, what brought this to the attention of the police, even though there was 10 prior complaints against Ruby Franke. But it was the catalyst that got them both arrested. And then to think and to look back and to think that this woman, Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke, were counseling other people. These sick individuals were counseling other people. And how did that happen? And not only how did it happen, but how did it become quiet that they were this abusive? Someone was protecting them. And we speak about the elephant in the room here. And many people point to me and they say, Sarge, the elephant in the room is the church was protecting them, referring clients to them, and basically dictating to them how they should be counseling people. And if that's the case, how can you trust anything in this entire case, including the courts, the police, the judges? Are they all in on this whole religious aspect of this case? I think that could be very scary. But when I say this, many say, oh, you're naive. You're not in Utah. That's the way it is. And wow. So I'm just bringing that A.L. Almquist, you just have to love those Mormons. Well, I'm not living it. So I don't have personal knowledge of this. Marianne Knapp, every day, how are they getting away with this? I bet their church. Well, that's what I was sort of leaning towards, and I was sort of implying, and I was hoping some people would come out of the chat, the woodwork, and say, Sarge, that's absolutely 100% correct. You're right. And this is why, but no one's volunteering right now.
Strange. Then police said Ruby Franke's 10-year-old daughter was found in the home as well, malnourished. Police say a YouTube video showed Franke in the home 2 days prior and that she was aware of what was happening to her children. Franke and Hildebrandt are Mormons, and they talk about God in many of their videos and what they say he wants. This week, Jessie Hildebrandt, Jodi's niece, spoke on YouTube about her aunt.
Jodi and my parents had a conversation. Jodi told them to leave me with them, or me to leave me with her, and for them to just go and to not say anything and to just pack up the things and just go. And so a few hours later, I get a knock on the door. I was asleep. And it was Jodi and my grandparents telling me that my family had left and I wasn't going with them, and that my life was about to change pretty dramatically. But everything was revolved around my worth. So anything that gave me a sense of worth, I was not allowed to have anymore. I had really long hair that I loved. Had to cut it all off.
You know, that she sounds, and I've heard her speak many times before, but isn't ego one of the things that religion tries to sort of pound out of you? Ego and pride, the pride. And those are two things that when controlled are good things, not bad things. So when religion tries to get rid of ego and being proud and having pride in yourself, having pride in what you do, like it's not an attribute, it's a negative. That's when I really question things, and this is what they were preaching, like something you love, something like in this case, she loved her hair. Let's cut your hair then. I mean, that type of deprivation is really crazy, but this is what they were preaching. And then when it gets to the stage of teaching other people this, they're destroying people's lives. And this poor girl here, she survived, but barely.
Because it gave me a sense of worth. Going to school gave me a sense of worth. Not allowed to do it.
With me to discuss Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke is someone who's covering the case out there in Utah. She is Amanda Gilbert. She's a reporter with KUTV out in Salt.
We're gonna hold off on this because I think we know as much about this as they do. But so here they put this team together of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, and let's face it, Ruby Franke lost her channel, a channel with over 2 million subscribers because of egregious behavior, which only YouTube knows exactly what was the level of her behavior that made her lose her channel. Donna Champion, you're right, Bill. That's why I follow your channel. Religion has always been for the evil Jodi Hildebrandt of the world to hide behind. Well, Donna, I agree with you, but not just her. There's a lot of religions that have some um, real evil aspects to them, and preach things that aren't healthy for human beings to follow. And there's really good things about some religions do uh, some really good things, but some do some really bad things. And this was an example of bad things done by a religion, and put two of them together. Put Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt together, and you got a lollapalooza of bad acts. And unfortunately, the recipient of these bad acts were the children of Ruby Franke, right? Could you imagine in this day and age, in people of this type of financial means, that their children were malnourished? Are you kidding me? You see how well fed. Look how well fed she is, and yet children under her care, living with her, God knows why they were living with her, were emaciated, malnourished, and it takes several months for a human being to become malnourished. So, what were they feeding these kids, or what were they not feeding them? They weren't feeding them. They obviously were malnourished. And when you see, the picture of Jodi Hildebrandt, who is she to starve someone? She obviously never had a hungry day in her life, And I'm not trying to be funny, but she obviously is no stranger to the food table, right? And yet they're not going to feed children, and they're going to use, even more so, they're going to use food as a punishment, and sleep deprivation, and taking away things, and punishing their children in ways that is not okay. Folks, if you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel memberships with, count them, 5 different levels. And you can support us in that way. And we've had a great year in 2023. We're looking for an even better year in 2024. And you guys that are in the chat there, you can assure us that we reach our next goals next year. And, the other thing is that we have fun with this. I mean, that's part of this, is to have fun and to cover these stories and to spread the word a little bit,
The first thing that they did was take a bed away. They don't have beds. So Chad slept on the hard ground for months, and it's run by psychologists and therapists. And if not having a bed was psychologically damaging, then they wouldn't have suggested that.
And we have come to learn in our research and covering this case that Ruby and Kevin have separated. They've been not together for over a year. And Ruby started working with a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt, kind of like a self-help counselor. They worked together at this organization known as Connections. Ruby was listed as a certified mental fitness trainer. So she's in this business with Jodi, separated from her husband, and then you fast forward to August of this year. She and Jodi, her business partner, are each arrested and charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse of Franke's 2 young children. They were staying at Hildebrandt's place. Her 12-year-old son managed to escape Hildebrandt's home, ran to a neighbor who called 911. The boy was reportedly emaciated with wounds. There was evidence that he had been tied up. His 10-year-old sister, Ruby's daughter, was reportedly found in the house in similar condition. She was taken to the hospital to be treated for malnourishment. Ruby and Jodi, they were each charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. And it ranges from everything from physical torture to injuries that result in emotional harm to starvation and so on. And it was our understanding that each one of those aggravated child abuse counts carried a max of 15 years in prison. Now, I spoke with Brian Schnee, who's been following this case since the very beginning. Brian Schnee is a reporter and anchor from KUTV2 News. And we had been talking just, I think it was last week, about how prosecutors requested a court hearing for December 18th. It was called a waiver hearing, and it was to see whether a defendant in Utah waives the preliminary hearing. You know, the preliminary hearing is where prosecutors lay out their evidence.
You know, that's what they were talking about, that they were talking about this waiver hearing. And we said right away, we said, no, this is going to be an offer for a plea bargain. And we said early on, in fact, I have an episode a month or two ago that we said, who's going to cop a plea first? That was like the title. I don't have the exact title at my lips, but we said, who's going to turn first? Who's going to flip first? And it was pretty obvious that the person that was going to flip first was the one that seemed the least egregious. However, when you watch those videos of Ruby Franke, you say, wow, she's evil. She has some evilness to her, right? As someone said when they watched the hearing, she's angry. She's an angry woman. And I agree. She's extremely angry. You know, I was looking in the chat for someone's comments, and now I can't find it. I guess I'm going to have to miss it. That's why it's good when I have someone assisting me in this show. But like Mike Geary or Phil was supposed to come on today, but Phil's all over Brooklyn. You know, he's picking up the cannolis all over the place in Brooklyn. That's just a cliche. But you know, when we even talk about the timeline of Ruby Franke, her podcast 8 Passengers goes back to January 2015. So when we look at that podcast was on for 7 years, and it took 7 years for YouTube to say, wow, there's some real problems here. We don't like what's going on here. And what do you think it took YouTube to cancel a podcast that was bringing in the amount of money that 8 Passengers was bringing in? If they had 2 million subscribers, how much money do you think YouTube was making off that podcast? 30,000 a month, 40,000 a month? Do you think they wanted to give that up? Absolutely not. So therefore, the behavior must have been so egregious that even YouTube said, we got to get rid of this show. We got to cancel this show because it's right on the air. She's showing bad parenting techniques right on the air. So how can we keep this? How can we keep this going on? Katerina Frodlova, she knew her growing up older son needed a good bed mattress. She took it away from him. Yeah, Katerina, she made him sleep in like a beanbag bed for months, not for days, but for months. And that didn't raise flags. Like, that's not how you treat your children. And I always thought, you know, again, not to beat a dead horse, but Kevin Franke was just as bad. You know, he was complicit in this. I want to show a little video from him about 2 months ago when his oldest daughter went to their home, what we would on the police call a clothes job, to remove some clothing and some belongings to the children so that they could go about their lives. And with the police present, they broke into the house and they took some items. He wanted his daughter arrested. Well, he said for robbery. Like, no, breaking into a house, if it was criminal, it's not a robbery, it's a burglary, right? So he didn't even know those charges. And I just want to play this because he seems like an angry man also here.
There you go. Is it all there?
Yes. Yeah, explain to me again why this was not robbery.
Because it's a civil issue. It's, you guys are family. She's been in the house before. You haven't been in the house in a year.
Explain to me why it wasn't robbery. Okay, I'll explain to you, because robbery is the forcible taking of property. That cancels out robbery. So let's move on now.
she had interest in the items. She didn't take them with the intention to deprive you of them. So theft, that's the theft code. We have to prove intent to deprive you of the items. And that wasn't her intent in having them. So the detective sergeant said that we're not going to charge her for anything.
See, he's brainstorming. You could see his brain is overheating as he's thinking. How come she's not charged then with breaking into my house? Because there was no intent to deprive you of any property. And she lives there. So there's no crime here.
Do some more research on that.
You're welcome to do that. If you want to follow up with their detective yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll be here on Tuesday. His name's Sergeant McCoy. Okay. You're welcome. Take care.
So
There you
then,
go.
I mean, there you go with that. It's I'm just showing that to show that, you know, Kevin Franke, he was involved in this too. And it seems like he's skated away from any culpability with this. It doesn't seem like he has any responsibility. It doesn't seem like he's involved in this. Like even when it seemed like he filed for divorce to distance himself from his wife, even though he hadn't seen them in 14 months. But as we had mentioned on last night's show, could there very well be a civil part to this case? And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is after the criminal charges are disposed of, could people start suing Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt for malpractice? You bet. You bet. And guess what? You think Kevin Franke wants his financial future tied to his wife, who's almost definitely going to get sued civilly after these criminal charges are over with? So could that be the reason he's distancing himself? Barking at the moon, both her and Kevin decided the two youngest had been too selfish during the year, so they had to sit and watch the other kids open presents, and they got none. Oh, I can't think of many things crueler than that, barking at the moon. That's pretty cruel. You know, we used to be threatened when I was a kid to get coal in our stockings. And of course, that was a joke. But that was the joke in the Cannon family. You're going to get coal in your stockings. Why would we get coal? Well, because you're bad, you know. But yeah, that's how cruel is that? Not to give a kid a present, you know. And these were the techniques that they used. Heimdall, I really hope that he does not get those kids, because although he was not in the home, he approved of her methods by not stopping what Ruby was doing. You know, Heimdall, I 100% agree with you. But you know something? The way in New York, it's called the Bureau of Child Welfare. In Utah, it's called the Department of Children and Family Services. The way they look at things, they almost look as like it's a bad parent. It's better to give the kids to a bad parent than give the kids to the state or to a relative. That's their mentality. And is Kevin Franke a bad parent? I think so. I think so. You know, Katerina Frodlova, who can charge? Well, the only people that can charge Kevin Franke is the state, is the prosecutor's office, you know. And right now, it doesn't appear that he's getting charged with anything. So is their whole case predicated upon the last 14 months when Kevin Franke was out of the house? Is that where the whole case came from? You know, I always like to play this, the niece of Jodi Hildebrandt, and just she's very articulate. And when you hear some of the things, and this is the spotlight that needed to be shown upon this. And let's listen to her for a minute.
We knew 14, almost 15 years ago that she's already done this to me. And people saw and people witnessed and did nothing. She made me sleep outside in the snow. She duct taped me. I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone.
What in theory was the justification for the duct tape?
The duct tape was, in her words, an external reminder to me that I'm a liar and that every word that comes out of my mouth is a lie. I understand why the public is focusing on Ruby. It's Ruby's children. But all of these theories and these modalities and these parenting ideas, that all comes from Jodi. That is 100% the therapeutic ideas of Jodi Hildebrandt.
Did you ever imagine a day where you would be free and Jodi would be in prison?
No, it's it still feels so surreal. We knew.
So it's so everyone, of course, did. It's hard to believe that Ruby Franke got all her ideas from Jodi Hildebrandt, since Ruby Franke had her podcast starting in 2015, which is 7 years ago, going on 8 years ago, right? So how about all the ideas and all the bad acts she showed on her show, live on the air? All the video they have of bad acts that she perpetrated upon her children. Did she learn all those things from Jodi Hildebrandt? I don't know. It's hard to believe that, right? A podcast goes back to 2015, and then she loses it in 2022 and goes to work with, as partners with, Jodi Hildebrandt on that the site Connections. And you saw the kind of money they were charging for bad advice, right? Wonder what you get for good advice. They were charging sick money for bad advice. My God. And I was trying to be funny, and maybe it's not funny, but they were charging this crazy. Look at that. Jodi Hildebrandt, MS, create joy in your life and relationships. Wow. If you create joy, I'd hate to see what bad advice would do, but it's definitely not joy that you were presenting. I think that many people would come and say you destroyed their life, you destroyed their marriage, you caused them immense pain, immense emotional pain.
And individuals, along with coaching for businesses. Franke worked with Hildebrandt at Connections. Prior to Connections, Hildebrandt worked as a therapist, treating people who struggled with addiction to drugs and alcohol. One of her former clients is a man named Adam Steed. Steed says he was sexually abused by someone with the Boy Scouts of America when he lived in Idaho as a child. He then moved to Utah. He became married, and that's when he met Jodi Hildebrandt. When did you first encounter Jodi Hildebrandt?
So my Mormon bishop asked me and my wife to go to her. I had just finished passing the statute of limitations in Idaho for criminal and civil sexual child abuse. They had this bizarre statute for 5 years. And I had changed that with my dad and a lot of people that we had done a grassroots movement together. And I moved down to Utah, and I had just finished a settlement case with Boy Scouts of America. And then, like, immediately afterwards, my bishop asked me to go to Jodi Hildebrandt with my wife for therapy.
Adam Steed says he and his wife were seeking counseling for ordinary issues that come up in any marriage.
Yeah, just normal marriage issues. Outside the fact there was a lot of stress on our marriage because we had done a settlement for child abuse with Boy Scouts of America, and we were having we had a 1-year-old baby, and we had a newborn coming along, and we were both in school at Brigham Young University trying to do all of our credits, and my ex-wife had some issues as well that were kind of difficult, and I had trauma from what happened to me in the past, and we were just trying to be normal people and live a normal life and start and have a beautiful life after some of the things we've been gone.
Once he tried to leave her counseling sessions, Steed said things got ugly.
She was just contacting, like she didn't want me to leave her therapy group. And she had my wife send an email message to me of the terms so that the marriage wouldn't end. And it included that I had to go back to Jodi. I had to pay for, it was thousands of dollars a month. That I couldn't go to any other therapist. I was trying to go to other therapists because they were saying I was an addict in denial. And, you know, it was just crazy. Jodi, in her group, she said that if you had to spend time not thinking about something, just the fact that you had to not think about it meant you were an addict. I mean, she brought everybody in. And now she was saying I was mentally unhealthy and I couldn't choose for myself because of how unhealthy I was. I couldn't choose to go to another therapist. This was my addiction working to not receive the confrontation that she had.
Unbelievable. It's so scary that someone like that, you know, when people are having mental health issues or issues where they need counseling, you're somewhat fragile, you know, and you're somewhat weak mentally, you know, and there's nothing ashamed with someone that is going for help. And then the help isn't help. It's something that's hurting. And so here you are, and this man, Adam Steed, he's going there with his wife. And instead of her helping their marriage, she's blowing it apart. She's destroying it. And just a scary thought. And so when I talk even about the civil aspects of this case and the likelihood that there could be a huge civil case after the criminal part of this is over with, yeah, there's a real possibility that there is going to be a civil part to this case. And, you know, when you think about it, you know, Ruby Franke's going to prison, maybe not as long as Jodi Hildebrandt. And, you know, just the fact that she is in jail for the past 3.5 months and is going to prison, you know, financially you can be ruined. But, you know, they have assets. She made a lot of money for a lot of years. So someone or many people are going to go after her and Jodi Hildebrandt civilly after this case is over with. So let's keep that in mind, that these people who Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke destroyed their lives, they're going to want to get paid. This is part of the statement of from the Winwood law firm.
Charges in the Washington County 5th District Court, along with their thoughts about her current family situation. Our client is working with the prosecutor's office and anticipates resolving this matter quickly by entering a plea agreement with the court on Monday, December 18th. Wow. So that part is key, right? Because there seems to be an agreement that has been worked out between Franke and the prosecutor's office. It's not like they're just putting off this offer. There has been negotiations behind the scenes. And
so there is a plea. And as we said, Jodi Hildebrandt earlier today at 11 a.m. Utah time, 1 p.m. New York time, Eastern Standard Time, pled guilty to 4 counts of child abuse. She was charged with 6. 2 of them were thrown out. She was charged with 6. Each one, she pled guilty. They threw out 2 of the charges. She pled guilty to 4 of the charges. Each one of those charges carries anywhere from 1 to 15 years in prison. And she pled guilty to 4. And when you watched her in the court plead, she seemed, as someone in the chat said, quite angry. Like, wait a minute, who are you angry at? People should be angry at you, you know. But she was angry. She came across as angry. She came across as anything but humble. I didn't see the humbleness in her. And usually when you're charged with a crime and you're pleading guilty, you better show some humbleness, because that guy in the black robe sitting above the courtroom, known as the judge, he has your future in his hands. And even though you pled guilty, The judge has a lot to say about that, right? And if anything, she did not seem humble at all to me. Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe Murray is a retired NYPD police officer and a fantastic defense attorney. You can get a hold of Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Not only is Joe Murray a fantastic attorney, he's also a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, and we appreciate him for all the support he has given us over the years. And we appreciate Joe Murray, no longer police officer, Joe Murray, attorney at law. So the next court appearance for Ruby Franke is going to be February 20th. On that date, we believe that that she will be allocuting, and that will be admitting to each subdivision of the statute in which she's pleading guilty to. And then she will be officially sentenced. And remember, we said she pled guilty to 4 of the charges, which carry 1 to 15 years in state prison to run consecutively. So if we look at that, and I'm no mathematician, and we say, well, so she's got 4 to 60 years, right? 15 times 4 is 60, right? 1 times 4 is 4. So if the lowest is 1, so 4 times 1, she could do 4 years at the very least to run consecutive. So could she be out with good behavior in less than 4 years, pleading to these felony child abuse charges? I think it's a possibility. I really do. So we're going to continue to follow this case and to bring you updates as we hear them. And pretty much everything that we know, Plant Lady, they did not say concurrent. They said consecutive. No, concurrent means running at the same time. It was very clear it was to run consecutive. So we're going to see what it amounts to. And this Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, they deserve to be punished for their bad acts, and especially it was bad acts upon children, which is the worst type of bad act you can perpetrate. So that's going to be our show for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. I was going to come on earlier, but there was a lot of people coming on live when the hearing was taking place live. So I decided to come on a couple of hours later. And so I'm glad that you guys in the chat joined me. And I want to wish everyone, and I'll probably be on before Christmas, obviously, but I want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season. I want you to be safe. I want you to enjoy time with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and just have a great time. And as I said, the most important thing is to stay safe out there. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless. From Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories.
One episode just ain't enough.